Video, I'm going to walk through creating an animation in Cinema and then baking it out to use in Adobe Aero. So what I have here is a cube. I resized it to 30.48 centimeters, which is 1 foot. And the reason for doing that is once you get it into Aero and you test it out on a physical device, a mobile device, you can see it in your space, your physical space, as a foot. And so I recommend experimenting with different object sizes, different scales, to see what they render as once you get them into Adobe Aero. But the basic idea here is I have this cube. I'm going to animate it over the timeline here, over 3 seconds, if this was 30 frames per second. And so to do that, Adobe Aero expects position, scale, and rotation as part of the FBX. And so I'm just going to experiment with the rotation here. And so I'm going to set this to 0. So by default, if you make a cube, so I'll start over, make a cube, and set it to 1 foot is 30.48 centimeters. So 30.48 centimeters, and do it in each direction. Sorry, 30.48. So under the object settings, 30.48 in each direction, and then I have a color, just a green color assigned to it as a material. And so I click on my cube and I go to coordinates, and I want to set all of these at once. And so on the 0 frame, I'm going to actually keyframe everything. So if you click this, record active objects, it'll assign a keyframe for everything that is going to be moved. So I'll assign this, and it changes all these little bubbles to red, signaling that there is now a keyframe set for all of those. And so now I'm going to move this timeline to the end and change my rotation to 359 and hit it again. And so now it keyframed everything again. And now when I play it, I will have a rotation animation. And you can get more complicated than this, of course, by keyframing different values. And so we know our animation works. And so now I'm going to just export this animation as an FBX. And there's 2 ways to bake an animation. So I could go up to my window, timeline, F-curve, and I can see for this current object all the tracks right here that have animation. And the only one I changed was the rotation. And so of course I could go in here and kind of experiment with moving the value and changing the animation with the curve itself, or changing this to like a linear curve, in which case it changes the way the animation looks. And so I'm going to just undo, and undo to bring it back to a full rotation in my animation here. And so what I expect to see once I export this is this exact behavior once I bring it into Aero. And so close that. Yeah, like I said, I could export it 2 ways. So I could go back into my timeline here, and I could pick the object and go to Functions, Bake Objects, and this will actually bake keyframes for every single part of the animation, as long as I have position, scale, rotation, these things checked. And it'll correspond to the tracks right here that I have, even though I don't really have anything in some of them, most of them. And if I say OK, then it'll bake it, and it'll actually go to my dope sheet here. I can see everything that's been baked, and I can go into each one and change it if I wanted to, or I could just, go and delete it all if I don't want to do it that way. So if I do that, I have to reanimate. So I'm going to undo and actually go back to my animation that's interpolated here. So what's happening is the system is interpolating values between the keyframes that I set. And this is usually what's happening with most animations until you actually bake it out. So that's one option. The next option I can do just when I export it. So if I go File, Export Selected Objects, and I pick my cube, and I can go to FBX. The FBX exporter right here allows me to also bake all frames. So if I didn't bake it through the other method, I can click it here and bake the frames this way too. So you save a step by doing it this way. But either way, it works. So if I say OK, I'll save my cube, and I have some other tests here that I was working with. So this one's called Cube 8. Save. So I called it Cube 8 in this case. And so now if I go over to my folder and open it up in Autodesk FBX Review, I can see that my animation is here and it's baked, and it's going to loop just as I would expect. So that's great. And then the next step is to open it up in Aero. So in Adobe Aero, by default, it looks like this, but if you click this little guy in the corner, you can bring up the behaviors, and I want to drop my cube into the scene. And so once it puts it in here, I can kind of rotate around and see it. And for the object I have selected now, I can add a trigger. So if I go Trigger, Start, and click on Action, Play Animation, then I can see the cube I have. It has one clip right here. It says Cinema 4D Main. And if I hit play, I can preview my animation. And so and I can see it's 3 seconds long. I can shorten it. I can change the speed. I can do some other things, transition, treadmill. I can make it play infinite. So if I hit play, it's just going to spin forever. But it has that sort of easing animation that's going on. And so let's see here. So that's great. And if I go to preview and let it start, then it will basically just play like this forever. So the next step is to, from my home screen here, I can see I have a document called Baking Animation. And this is synced in the cloud, and so I can then see it on my mobile device. So that's all you need to do to get an animation out of Cinema 4D and into Aero.